He said, "You're 23 years old. You don't aspire to be anything more than a project manager."
Mm,
And I said, "Well, from where I'm coming from, that's all they told me that I could be."
yeah.
And he said, "No, I'm going to hire you to be a project manager, and I want you to think about what you want to do." And so he gave me the opportunity to lead a Fortune 500 account. I went around the country. I met with them. I took that account as if it was my own. I managed
Yeah.
his P&L like it was my own. But I
Yep.
learned how to manage a business.
What is up, everybody? We are back for another episode of the Outreach Podcast. Got a very special guest with me, Mr. Thomas Crowther. Thomas, how you doing, man?
I am doing great. And thank you for
Yeah,
having us for.
yeah. No, it's a pleasure, man. The honor is all mine. Just super excited that we get a chance to chat it up, man. Talk about your story, your journey. And I want to get right into it because time does go by extremely fast, especially, when you have people that are so accomplished, have been able to do some amazing things within their particular career path, and within the community at large. So talk to me a little bit because I want to get into this, man. We go delve into your story, okay? Um, I know where you are now, but of course, every journey to entrepreneurship is different. And that key word, that operative word in there is journey, right? You don't just arrive at the position that you are in today. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the beginning part. Like, how did you make this transition into entrepreneurship to start your own company?
Well, I would agree with you. It definitely was a journey. And I am so grateful for so many parts that helped us along the way. I think, first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, Paul. Just like uh, what you're doing and the message that you're setting is so important. Um, my journey started in a small island, thousands and thousands of miles away in a third world country called the Bahamas. I grew up in a very extended family. Uh, My mother had 10 kids. Um, the majority of us, besides three of us, had different fathers. We grew up in a challenging neighborhood. And so my key was education. So my mother, she had a third grade education. My father was from Jamaica, and so he went to the Bahamas in the early 60s. He had a background in accounting and surveying and fell in love with an island girl, and the rest was
Mm,
history. Uh, but my father and mother was key to make sure that all of us was educated. And so I lived in an area where the two brothers that was before me, they were lost in the system, right? They were lost to just, the distractions of the community that we were in.
mm,
And my mother was very, focused on ensuring that the younger ones did not get lost. Um, and so the key for me was just making sure I stayed in school. I graduated, but she was also entrepreneurial. Both my mother and father owned businesses. And I never, ever wanted to own my business.
mm,
I thought that I was going to just go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, and I would have, I had arrived. Um, but after going to school, I got a scholarship to go to school to the University of Nebraska at Kearney, where I studied construction management. It was just something I was always fascinated about. In my mother's business in the summers, we would leave the Bahamas and go to Miami um, for a vacation. And I would look up in the cars and I would see skyscrapers and I would see buildings and I would see cranes. And I'd be like, man, someday I want to work on a project like that. Someday I want to build something like that. So I was always fascinated in either getting in the architectural and engineering trades, especially being a part of a technical and vocational school. And so after college, I got I got a scholarship to go to college, but after college, I graduated and I got an internship in Dallas with a very, very large construction company. Um, and in 1998, I moved to Dallas and I served in every position uh, throughout my career with construction companies, from a
Mm.
field engineer to a project engineer to assistant superintendent to an estimator to a project manager to vice president. Um, but I was always curious. I always used my humble beginnings um,
Yeah.
and those experiences to grow.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing story. And I'm sure there's stories within,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Just that little story that you shared. Um, so you mentioned your mother had a third grade education, but she was an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my
Hmm.
mother, she left school in the third grade. Um, when she was growing up, once you got of a certain age, you were supposed to help with your
Yep.
parents, right? She had two younger brothers, and in the Bahamas, because we had so many tourists, she got into the tourism business, and it was a game changer for us and our family.
Mm.
um, every one of the children that my mother had, she woke us up every morning at 3 a.m. before we went to school to open what we call raft fairs to make dolls and bags and stuff that went into the souvenirs that tourists bought. And on the weekends, we would go to the bay and we would pick up seashells, and we would bring them home and she would make sure that we cleaned them before we went to school. And we would take those seashells and take it to her store, which was on the beach. And we would sell those seashells to tourists. But in that, my mother would always say to us, hey, when I'm sending you on the beach, I want you to connect with people. I want you to meet people, find out where they're from, find out what they do. I want you to see the world beyond the shores of the Bahamas. And so at an early age, she started teaching us how to build bridges
Mm.
because we, every day I saw two different worlds.
Yep.
I would wake up in a world where I had a striving mother with kids, and I would look across the street and there would be a neighbor that if they didn't catch a fish, they wouldn't eat.
Mm.
And then we would go to the beach, and on some of the tourists that was on the beach, they would come to the Bahamas in yachts. And so we would connect with their kids and they would invite us to their yachts. And so they would tell us about, some people were from England and Scotland and the United States and Canada. And I started learning about all of these worlds that was beyond the shorelines that I was living in.
Mm.
And so at an early age, she made sure that we had visibility into something that was bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's amazing, man. And to think, you go on to have a career, have a profession in construction, but from a child, you were building bridges relationally, though, and that's amazing, man, because you've always, it seems like just telling your story, you've always been a builder.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And,
and
and
it go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was something that was instilled, how to make connections. And to be honest with you, that was the catalyst to my career.
Mm.
Um, I was growing up, I was never the smartest kid. My mother would always tell me, she said, "Hey, Thomas, manners and mother's wit, which means common sense, will take you through the world. If you're respectful, if you have good common sense and you have a curiosity of life, right, you're gonna learn." And for me to leave the Bahamas and get a scholarship to go to Nebraska, which a lot of students that got that scholarship in the Bahamas turned it down. They were afraid to go to Nebraska. In fact, we didn't even know where Nebraska was.
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
we had an encyclopedia. I don't know if you remember the encyclopedias, right? And
Yeah, I do.
I had to open the encyclopedia and look to see where Nebraska was. And mind you,
Wow.
when I went there, I had never experienced snow or seasons. I didn't
Oh
know
yeah.
what fall was. I'd never seen leaves drop off a tree. I'd never experienced a snowstorm. But my mother said, "Hey, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You're going to get a scholarship to go learn. When you leave here, Thomas, right? When I left school, my mother, she didn't have funds to give me to go to school. In
Yeah.
fact, when I left to go to school, my mother's like, "Hey, you know, can you share some of your scholarship money so we could put on the store and generate revenue to help you in college, right?" And I had other scholarships from the island, but that was the situation that I left
Yeah.
the Bahamas
And
with.
I think that's where context matters so much, right? Because you have to understand somebody's story, I think, to really begin to build authentic and true relationships and to be a connector, because people are coming from different walks of life and different contexts. And so what you would imagine, what you would assume, even with that, right? You get scholarship money, and instead of it being, hey, this is going to go toward me going to pursue higher education, the context is, hey, can you share some of that money so that we could have this as well, to allow us to make ends meet, right? And I think that's a different context. And if you are unaware of the context or somebody's particular story or their journey, I think you could miss a large portion of who they are.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And I also knew that time was of the essence for me. So my scholarship was for 4 years. And so I knew my situation was different than everybody else.
Yeah.
So although I had fun waffles in college, I knew when it was time to handle business, I had to handle business because there was no more money coming.
Hmm.
There, if I didn't get done in 4 years, there wasn't going to be an extra year. And I had family at home because I was the first one in my family to leave the Bahamas. And I was one of the babies to go school abroad.
Yeah.
And so my thought was, and it was funny, Paul, when I left to go to school, both my father and mother said, "Thomas, we're sending you away to go and to build something that will be greater than yourself."
Mm.
That, and I never understood what that meant. I never knew what that burden meant, right? Or that gift that they instilled in me. And
Yeah.
and quite frankly, through most of my career, I ran from it, Paul.
Mm.
Right? I mean, I went to school, got my scholarship. I would come home. I wanted to get a job, wanted to grow. I was always ambitious, but I never thought that I would enter into entrepreneurialism, being an entrepreneur or to build a company. It was just something I didn't really think through. I had other people that said, "You have this spirit of entrepreneurialism in you,
Mm.
right? Have you thought about it?" And I was like, "Nah, hey, I got bills to pay,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not really interested. I got a job and what's not."
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I'm sure it wasn't just an instant decision to start your own company and move into entrepreneurship. So talk to me a little bit about that transition. Like, how was that process? How did it unfold?
Yeah, it was. I firmly believe to, that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a store, and
Mm.
I do think that um, to shepherd a company is a calling.
Yeah.
And so for me, I graduated in '98, grew through my career. All I ever wanted to be, when I came out of school and I went to work, I used to work in the field and in estimating. And one day I saw this guy come to the job site. He had on a crisp pair of jeans, a nice pair of boots, and a sports jacket. And I was at the time an assistant superintendent working on a job. And so I looked at my superintendent and I was like, "Hey man, what does that guy do?"
Yeah.
And he said, "He's the project manager." I'm like, "Man." And he has a nice pair of, this is Katz, he has a nice pair of boots. He's Chris. He's
Yeah.
talking to the owner. He's conducting deal. I was like, man, I want to do what he does, right? And so I went to the website of the construction company that I was working on to see what's the path to get to that position. And there was nobody on that website that looked like me.
Mm.
There was mostly Caucasian men that was on the website. There was no females, there was nothing. And so I went in to talk to my manager and I was like, hey, what's the step do I need to do to be a project manager? And he's like, well, that guy has been with the company for 20 years, right? He started as a superintendent. Man, Thomas, I don't know. I think what you're going to do and where your strength is, because you're a big boy, right? I think you're a good pusher. You're going to be real good in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And at an early age, I started to accept that. And then I met when I met my wife, and my 8th grade teacher, she stayed in contact with me. She sponsored me when I was in college, and she would call me mostly every week and say, Thomas, what are you doing? What's your career path? Where are you going? And after I had kids, I said, hey, I want to be a project manager. So I started taking control of my career. And after 6 years, I left that company to be a project manager.
Mm.
And then I got an opportunity to work with another company. In fact, when I went on the interview, I interviewed the division manager. And he said, what do you want to be, Thomas, in your career? And at the time, I was probably at best, Paul, I probably was about 23. And he said to me, I said to him, I want to be a project manager. He said, you're interviewing for a project manager position. No, what's your career aspirations? And I said, well, I want to be a project manager. He said, you're 23 years old. You don't aspire to be anything more than a project manager.
Mm.
And I said, well, from where I'm coming from, that's all they told me that I could be.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm going to hire you to be a project manager. And I want you to think about what you want to do. And so he gave me the opportunity to lead a Fortune 500 account. I went around the country. I met with them. I took that account as if it was my own. I managed his P&L like it was my own. But I learned how to manage a business. And it drew attention from the family that owned the company. They started connecting with me. They started saying, hey, we want to send you for this learning opportunity and that learning opportunity. And so fast forward, I grew to be a vice president. I was like, okay, I'm a vice president. I'm set. I got a 2-story house, white picket fence.
Yeah.
I got a baby. And my 8th grade teacher called me. She said, Thomas, don't forget that you left the Bahamas with aspirations for someone else to follow behind you. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I think this is where I'm supposed to be. And 6 months later, I got laid off from that position. The company said, hey, we want to go a different direction. And I was like, well, define a different direction, man. Do you want me to move? No, you go someplace else. And we're going to go a different direction. And so that same 8th grade teacher called me. She called and my wife answered the phone. She said, Thomas just got laid off. And she said, I want to talk to him. And she said, okay, Thomas, what's next?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a nap. She says, no. She says, I want you to spend some quiet time and meditate. And I said, well, I'm going to reach out some friends to see if there's any other jobs in the market. She's like, Thomas, what was your dreams when you left the Bahamas? And I said, I just wanted to be successful. She's like, you never dreamed? Do you think that after the last 25 years of working for these businesses, do you think that you could add value to another client? And I said, man, nobody's going to want to work with me. I mean, I don't have any money. I don't have a website. I don't know anybody. She said, well, we'll go to sleep. Let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so she called me the next day and she said, okay, did you reflect on it? I was like, yeah, I reflected a little bit. She said, what do you need to start a business if you were interested? I said, well, I need capital. She says, well, you've been working 20 something years. I know you got some money saved. And I said, yeah, me and Trish have a little bit of money put away. She's like, what else do you need? I was like, well, I probably need a website. She's like, okay. And so the next day we talked, she's like, hey, I found this place called Wix. Here's a website. You
Yeah,
got
yeah.
some money. Let's go get some business cards. She's like, I want you to take all the business cards and start calling people. So I just started calling people I knew and started fact finding.
Yep.
And believe it or not, I called one of the relationships that I had from that Fortune 500 company. And when I called him, he said to me, we had started pretty young. He had grown in the company to be a director. And he said to me, he said, TC, what are you doing now? Last time I heard from you were like a VP of construction somewhere. And I was like, well, I'm starting my own business. He said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, if I can find a client. He said, man, I just left a meeting where my leadership was taking me to task because we're going into different cities and different communities, doing major projects and rollouts. And in 5 years, when we go back, we can't find any of the businesses that we used in 5 years. He said, so if you're serious, I want to help you.
Mm.
And so I slept on it. I called him back. I said, okay, how do we partner? Never in my life did I ever think a company of this magnitude would help me. I just didn't think we were good enough we would qualify. He said, I have a problem in Louisiana. And so we had to go and study to get licensed Louisiana, to get a test. And we passed the test, thank God,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They gave us something. And I applied everything that I learned from those companies to do pre-construction, to procure, to execute, and to find business. And to be honest with you, our first opportunity was a business helping us.
Yeah.
And what I learned from that journey is that if you're called and you have the right heart, doors will open for you.
That's true. Yeah.
You
Yeah. You know, if you that no, that's I completely agree, man. You know, when there's a vision, like God will make that provision for the vision. Um, you know, when you're called, because that's a position that, and I always say leadership is more about a responsibility than it is a title.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with certain positions in life. And you have to see that as an opportunity for you to be responsible for those people that you've been blessed enough to lead. So how do you grow them? How do you allow them to become what they have the potential to become under your leadership, under your guidance? And I think you have to steward those positions well. And oftentimes people get into positions for the position,
right,
and they don't get into the position for the responsibility.
right,
Right.
right.
And I think that's a difference between a transactional leader and a transformative leader.
Yeah, that is so key, Paul, because I tell people all the time when they come talk to me and they ask me about entrepreneurialism, I always say why. I was like,
Yeah.
because that was not something I wanted to do. I felt I was called to do it. And I do believe that, I believe in this philosophy that everything that you want to do is on the other side of hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is that when I started my business, I felt that I had to go through a break-in process. I had grown to be a vice president of a company. We had made money at nice house, right? But God had to humble me because in order to lead people and to
Yep.
lead with empathy and to have compassion and to be able to deal with the failures that come with entrepreneurialism and starting a business, you have to be humble enough to never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Second, to be able to realize that feedback is a gift.
Yes, it is. We say it all the time.
Yes, sir. Because when we started our business, we were fortunate enough to have a client that gave us an opportunity. As we started to grow, the expectations grew too.
Yep.
So it became less about you having an opportunity and more about can you deliver at a high level with this opportunity. So you have to learn as you grow with these basic skill sets, like you're saying, being a steward, being humble, having grace, having the opportunity to succeed for the grace to fail. And you have to have compassion for people because that dynamic of leading people is so unique. I remember we were at a job and I dealt with the first time I was a young business owner and one of our employees had a person in their family that passed away.
Mm,
You know, I I I didn't know how to coach him through that.
yeah.
And this was a key person. We had to make changes. And so the only thing I knew what to do was to say, hey, go take care of your family and I'll come down and lead this project whilst you're done. I mean, we were a small company and the client said, hey, why are you out there doing it? And I was like, well, because it's the right thing to do. I could bring another person in here, but we're going to lose continuity. I want to make sure that you know that you have our organization's attention. And that's the difference between, you know, being 100-year-old company and being, a young company where you're closer to the ground level. And you might have the title of president or CEO, but your job really is to be a servant. You have to serve others above yourself. And because of those principles, right, it has been a catalyst to us growing in our business.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is good, man. And so now, so the Crowther Group is based in Dallas. You guys do amazing work. Talk to us a little bit about the type of work that the company does. Because when we think about construction, oftentimes it's an industry, and you know this, that few know enough about, right? And especially as we talk about the importance of introducing maybe a younger demographic to the industry of construction and showcasing just how much construction influences culture. Because every defined space, regardless of what it is and what it's used for, this industry constructs it, builds it, has its hand in it. Um, so talk to us a little bit about kind of what you guys are fortunate enough to do at the Crowther Group.
Yeah. So like you said, we're based on the DFW. We really focus on five main sectors: retail, healthcare, education, office, and what we call mission critical.
Mm,
And what we do, our business model is that we believe in building communities one partnership at a time. So what
yeah,
that means for us is that we look for projects that we can do that can have impact on our communities, where they buy their food, where they get educated, where they get their health care, because it creates a more meaningful interaction for our employees. Um,
mm,
and our strategy is that we look specifically to hire people from that community. So for us, we've been able to pivot from retail to education, and K through 12 has become one of our largest sector. And the reason why that happened is because when we were doing retail, that client had an interest and technical and vocational and trade school. So we got connected with a PTech and early collegiate high school. And when we were working with them and serving with them, they said, "Why aren't you building for us?"
yeah,
And at first I was like, "Man, it's just too hard to get into the public space." But we studied it. We realized that that client wanted to work with businesses like us, and we started hiring people from those schools in those communities, and it has actually grown to be one of our largest sectors.
oh, that's great. That's great. And talk to us a little bit about, because workforce development is huge. And when you have employers that are intentional about hiring from communities, underrepresented communities or what have you, especially as it pertains to the construction industry, because you spoke about that even in your own career and not seeing others that look like you in some of the leadership positions. Of course, that's still something that we are trying to have more advancement in. So talk to me a little bit about kind of how transformative and what it means to that younger audience that is being able to have opportunities because of the intentionality of your company.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that gives me the most satisfaction. When I walk through our organization, I feel like uh, I see just a whole different melting pot from different
Yeah.
communities. And so for me, being able to hire people that are from our communities, that go to the schools, that want to be here, first of all, I think it aligns with our core values, one of which is caring, right? They just care. I mean, one of my favorite stories is one of my senior project managers is a graduate of Dallas ISD. Her son goes to Dallas ISD. So when we work in that school district, she is looking at that project through a different set of lenses than someone that is not from this community or this market would. And so it gives us a differentiator when we execute. Um, Two of the students that was a part of our P-Tech program, one is interning with us every summer and one just graduated from college. And so as a business owner, there's no greater satisfaction than know that you hired someone from the 11th or 12th grade. You saw them go through junior college. They went to college, they're graduating, and every step of the way they've worked with your company.
Yeah.
And this week we made him a full-fledged assistant superintendent with our organization. Um, I think us having diversity of thought to approach hiring different than our competitors has given us a push in our business. What we realized is that we weren't able to go to the universities where our competitors, larger construction companies were competing, right?
Yeah.
They
Yep.
had they had 100-year head start on us. So what we did is we said, okay, maybe we can't go to the University of X, right? But can we go to a urban school district that has a P-Tech and early collegiate program, which means that when the student graduates, they graduate with an associate's degree.
Mm-hmm.
So they can choose their path. Do they want to come work for us full time, or do they want to go and finish the next 2 years and get a bachelor's? Well, in some cases, it's allowed us to start connecting with kids at the junior and sophomore level. And it's allowed us to get more rooted.
Yeah.
Um, and this is just not from a technical standpoint. We recruit project coordinators, accounting coordinators, estimators, engineering. So in our business, there's so many different facets of construction
Yep.
that story is not told. We have, if you want to go to the field, we have a field position for you. If you want to work in the back of house, we have back of house position from HR to IT to accounting to project coordinating to estimating. So we like to meet our potential employees where they're at, and it starts to foster more loyalty. So a lot of the students that we're hiring, they align so well with the Crowther Group and the clients that we work with. We had a client in our office the other day, and we were entertaining some students that was in an early collegiate high school. And because that client was able to walk through the office and see that, they said to us, hey, we have a program where we're trying to do the same thing. Can you come and work with us and help us do that? And so it's been just having that diversity of thought. And
Yep.
it's like you said, serving something greater than yourself. Because when we entered this space, it was because we were trying to align with a client and serve them with technical and vocational schools, early collegiate schools, P-Tech schools, programs like Construct Reach. We didn't have the eyes to go do work for that client. But it's like you said, when you have faith, right, those provisions will come.
Yeah.
And it's been a catalyst to our business.
Oh, that's amazing, man. And I'm assuming that, just with the servant heart that you approach leading and, being able to run a company with, that's influenced the culture of just the operations of your organization, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's from the company that we were 7 years ago to where we are today. It's night and day. Um,
Yeah.
Everybody's held at an account. Everybody cares in what they do. They're proactive in what they do. They have a diversity of thought. We have a saying internally that the best idea wins. Um,
Mm.
when we have meetings, we can have a meeting in a room from where I'm in the meeting all the way down to an intern.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we'll go around the room and say, what do you think? What do you see? And sometimes some of our best ideas come from the person that's in the room that hasn't said anything. They might not have
Yeah.
construction experience, but they listened, they saw everything, things that we may have missed. And it's just allowed us to move like a speedboat in a huge market. Um,
Yeah. No, that's good. And that's empowering, for somebody to have a voice at the table where the title would suggest that they don't have any room or any space or they don't have a voice.
yeah,
And so that's empowering because I always say, potential needs the chance to become. And like you never get a chance to witness what you have the potential to become unless you're in an environment that cultivates what's inside of you,
yeah. And
and I think that's important.
that's so spot on because I think about when I came up, and I tell our people all the time, there's no glass ceiling here at the Crowther Group. I said my aspiration is I still want to go backpack in Europe someday.
Mm,
Not today, but I do want to. I was like, so I'm looking for the person that's going to push me out. Who wants it? Who wants it? And who's willing to put in the sacrifice to do it? Uh, Now, with that comes, like you said, a lot of responsibility. That means that you might have a client calling you at 2 a.m. in the morning.
yeah.
You might have, I mean, you might have to figure out, okay, how do I say no for the betterment of the company? You have to understand, when you have a tough job, how to finish that job, even though sometimes in business, we're a for-profit company, but I've had to make business decisions in term for the long term of our business rather than the short term.
Yep.
So we might take a loss on this project to protect the relationship with a client. And we openly discuss those things internally because it helps us with our culture. And when we interview now, we have a 3-step interviewing process. So the first process with interviewing is a technical interview, which is usually with your reporting manager. Do you know what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
The second interview that we have is what we call a cultural interview. And that's people that you're going to be working with in our company across Edmonton. And if you can't get past that cultural interview, we don't hire you.
Yeah.
Because we've learned that if you don't have the culture that we are trying to foster, you can't serve a client that's their mission is to educate students, educate urban kids. If you don't have that culture that we have, you don't understand it. Maybe sometimes you can't pour that concrete because that school district is more concerned about making sure their children eat breakfast
Yeah.
because they're not sure what happened when they left the school. So the first thing they want to do when that kid comes to school is make sure they eat. And so we've had people that were so concerned about pouring a slab that they didn't understand that you couldn't have the concrete trucks coming into the school because the principal was more concerned about getting those kids off the bus and straight to the kitchen.
Yeah.
And so we've learned along the journey that, if we do everything with that servant's heart, if we fail forward,
Yep.
we'll be okay. I mean, as a young business, we embrace the phrasing of saying, hey, let's not make the same mistake twice. And if we lead with love and we fail with love and we're open and transparent to our clients, right? They'll give you the grace. Now, as Patrick Lencioni would say in his book, like, saying I messed up here and I messed up here and I messed up here and I messed up here. That's not a good model. That's more of a
Right.
competency issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But so you have to be able to execute, but you want to make sure that you're able to say, here's our systems, here's how we see it. What's your business model?
Mm-hmm.
And we tell it to our people because make sure when you work with your clients, you understand what's keeping them up at night. So
Yeah.
you can be their easy button. I mean, if we're working in a store, that store manager is concerned about the guest experience. So how can you make your construction project invisible to that client?
Mm-hmm.
If you're working in a hospital, whether we're remodeling it or we're building a new hospital, those doctors are concerned about saving lives and preventative care. The last thing on their mind is your construction project.
Yeah.
And so it's being really unique to shift from that mindset, because ultimately we're judged by budget, cost, and schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But to have the ingredients surrounding that, that makes it a smooth construction process is something that's have to add value to me as a leader.
Yeah. No, well, Thomas, I appreciate the time, man. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge, the journey that you have, from the Bahamas over here to the United States. It's just a true story of inspiration and success. And I'm just glad I know you, man. I'm glad we get a chance to chop it up every once in a while. I get a chance to see the work that you are doing. And I'm telling you, man, it is an inspiration for a lot of people. And so thank you for sharing your journey.
And thank you, Paul. I mean, I think most people don't know that your business is a family business. So
Yeah.
I just want to celebrate you and your family for what you guys have done, for you getting our industry out there, making it more visible, and creating opportunities for people that look like us, to be able to know that there's a path for them. The work that you and your family do is so important.
Oh,
Thank you.
man. Thank you, brother. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yes, sir.